we're already in a sort of quasi military confrontation with them. It's not going to take the form of a conventional war and a conventional attack, but we have to be vigilant because since the US re-elected Donald Trump, the Russians view Britain, for whatever reason, whether justly or unjustly, as the strongest ally of Ukraine abroad.
As Andy Burnham continues to ensure then that UK relations with Ukraine remain iron tight, travelling to Kyiv for his first foreign visit as Prime Minister, Britain's relationship with Russia perhaps predictably continues to deteriorate. Yesterday it was revealed that the Kremlin had quietly removed their representative in the UK, Andrei Kelin, last month with no clear indication that he'll be replaced. While the Russian embassy in London denied that Russia intends to downgrade diplomatic relations between Moscow and Britain, it did admit that ties have deteriorated to an unprecedentedly low level. Well, joining me now is the former intelligence officer who ran the Russia desk for MI6, Chris Steele. Chris, good evening to you.
Hello there.
Thanks so much for being with us. Where would you put, based on your assessment and your experience here, where would you put UK-US relations? Are they at an all-time low, or is it sort of business as usual?
I think we've seen a steady deterioration in UK-Russia relations for many years, in fact, going back right to Litvinenko, the case of the radioactive poisoning in 2006. You'll recall, Russia has effectively been carrying out acts of war, if you like, on UK territory ever since. So I don't think there's anything particularly new in this. What is new, I think, is that the situation in the war, and particularly in Russia itself, has deteriorated. We've seen over the last few weeks that the Ukrainians have managed to hit significant targets deep inside Russia, and indeed have done things like brought the petrol supply in the country to a standstill. And therefore, I think Putin is feeling pressure, and that's why he's wanting to lash out to the UK, against the UK, in making the threats that he's making, some of which may have some substance, but which we've got used to living with, really, I think, over the last few years.
Yeah, the Kremlin today saying that the UK giving Ukraine those blueprints for long-range missiles that can strike deep into Russian territory, that move adds fuel to the fire. It undermines any chance of peace. I suppose they would say that, but I just wonder whether we can start to sew a few things together. This is a move by the UK, and tell me if you agree, but I don't think we would have seen this a couple of years ago. I think this is significant. This is the sharing of blueprints, the sharing of information to encourage and facilitate Ukraine to build their own weapons. It may be some way down the line, but the capability would be there. And in return, Ukraine is sharing secret battlefield intelligence with us to help us prepare for any conflict with Russia.
Yeah, the red lines have changed certainly over the last few years. If you remember, we had the issue about whether we were going to supply tanks to Ukrainians. Then it was aircraft, and then it was Storm Shadow, the missile we're talking about here, which of course the Ukrainians have used several times to great effect already, and in particular on an attack on a naval base in Crimea a couple of years ago. And indeed, even this weapon actually is only a medium-range cruise missile. It's not able to reach Moscow and St. Petersburg from Ukrainian territory, and presumably won't be used, therefore, in that regard. Some of the drones, I think, that we've designed and built in the UK, however, can reach those targets. But I think if we're going to see an end to this war, it has to be where Ukraine has hitting out from a position of strength. What we cannot see is the security and stability of Europe jeopardized by any kind of Russian victory on the ground that's attributed to Vladimir Putin.
Is there a risk that our security is further compromised because we have given Ukraine those blueprints for a long-range missile?
Yes, possibly. Although, as I say, I think it's a matter of degree, not of kind. When you consider that the Russians hired criminals in the UK to firebomb property that belonged to the former Prime Minister and cars and things that were Keir Starmer's originally. We're already in a sort of quasi military confrontation with them. It's not going to take the form of a conventional war and a conventional attack, but we have to be vigilant because since the US re-elected Donald Trump, the Russians view Britain, for whatever reason, whether justly or unjustly, as the strongest ally of Ukraine abroad. And indeed, as we've seen with the coalition of the willing, the ringleader, if you like, of other democratic countries. And certainly it's important that, as the Prime Minister said today, that we don't have.
Oh, your line is just quivering a little bit there. We'll just wait for it to catch up with itself. Chris, can you hear us? Oh, he's juddering away on the Zoom link. Chris Steele there, just explaining to us that yes, we are somewhat compromised, not dramatically, but this all adds to the context, really, that the UK is under some sort of quasi military battle already with Russia. Let's just see if Chris's line has stabilised. Chris, are you there? Chris Steele.
I am. I hope I'm here.
Yes, yeah. We had just one of those
Hi.
weird Zoom sort of blackouts there for a moment, but you were explaining to us how this does compromise us a little. The British French designed Storm Shadow cruise missiles, giving the blueprints for those to Ukraine. What can you tell us? I mean, this is your area of expertise. And we learnt this evening, just before the show, that Ukraine's handed Britain a gold mine. It's being described as secret battlefield intelligence to help it prepare for any conflict with Russia. That sounds dramatic. But what can you tell us about this intelligence? Because actually, in terms of defending ourselves, it seems like it'll be pretty useful and something that we can sort of roll out pretty quickly.
Yes, I think Ukraine, as time has gone by, has become an increasingly important ally for the UK and indeed for NATO. I mean, after all, this is where the cutting edge of modern warfare is playing out. The lessons are being learnt, and in particular, how to combat, defend yourself against Russian weapon systems and weapon systems that involve Chinese components and come from other countries like North Korea and Iran, those that are conceivably either our adversaries in an armed conflict or could be supplying weapons to our adversaries in an armed conflict. So I think this is very important. And I think that in general, when this war started, we were training the Ukrainians how to fight and how to use military platforms. I now believe that it's the other way around, that effectively the Ukrainians are sharing their experience and their technology and their innovation with us to very good effect. So as time goes by, one of the ironies of Russia's attack on Ukraine is Ukraine becomes a closer Western ally and becomes possibly a NATO ally in due course if Donald Trump and his light leave office.
And just to have a little look at the details of what we're to get. So it's intelligence that contains millions of images of Russian tanks, air defences, troops, drones and artillery systems. The data is going to train AI used by Britain's armed forces. It's been collected from thousands of cameras and infrared sensors across the battlefield in Ukraine. And it means that we'll be able to identify and respond to Russian threats more quickly than ever before, like Russian drones, for example. It could also be used, this technology, to protect airports, prisons and even railways and energy plants in the future. Protection against sabotage, against systems being hacked into. So it seems like it's going to be very useful indeed. One criticism, when Ukraine has handed us maybe blueprints or, tech relating to drones that they've developed, is that we've said, oh, yes, thank you very much. We'd love to know more about that advancement in drone tech, but then we don't do anything about it, Chris, either because our defence spending's been so hamstrung or because it just takes us a long time, much longer than Zelensky and the Ukrainian military, to actually realise some of this intelligence or some of these bits of data or plans.
Yes, and there's an argument to say that the defence review that took place only about a year or 18 months ago is already moribund because of what's happened in Ukraine. So I think it's very important that, and I'm sure that John Healey, as the former Defence Secretary, will realise this, that the programmes that we spend money on are fit for purpose and are designed to protect us from what is more likely to come our way rather than what is less likely. We're not going to see any kind of attempt by Russia to invade the UK or anything like that. But what we are going to see probably is as you say, hybrid attacks, possibly using drones, possibly using saboteurs, possibly using criminals that they've recruited online. Because this is the pattern we've seen, not just in the UK, actually, but throughout Europe. There have been several attacks in the last couple of months on munitions factories and technology centres in places like Italy and Bulgaria and Latvia and so on. And I think this is the way that the threat will manifest itself. Frankly, the Russian armed forces, conventional armed forces, have taken such a battering in Ukraine and still are, that it's highly unlikely, I think, that they will launch any kind of conventional attack on Europe. But they will up their game in terms of cyber and in terms of sabotage and in terms of possibly, I hate to say, assassination attempts on key industrialists and other targets.
Well, look, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Chris Steele, the former intelligence officer who ran the Russia desk for MI6. Great to speak to you. Thank you.